Hi, welcome to the 14-day weather forecast. This is a picture I took almost 3 years ago to the day. It's the frozen Grand Union Canal running through Berkhamsted. And that December 2022 did bring a notable spell of wintry weather. It's a big contrast though with how things have started this year. Temperatures are running well above the average already after the first 8 days. And if things continue in the current vein, we could be challenging some records come the end of the month. Therefore, the question is a change on the way? Let's see. Now, here's a picture at 18 GMT on Tuesday the 9th. And just before I run the sequence, I'm going to draw attention to one thing. It's generated using data from the ECMWF model. It's the first time I've done one of these forecasts using a sequence from the ECM model, and some of you will probably know that the ECMWF models are considered to be basically the gold standard in global medium range weather forecasting. They are the most accurate, so more accurate than the GFS, Canadian model, etc, etc. And also another thing about it is that it breaks down precipitation types into different categories. So there's rain and sleet and wet snow and snow. You can see the colour schemes which are used along the bottom there on the key. Okay, I will begin it. Let's see how things shape up. So a west or southwesterly flow remains in place across the UK, so it's going to be staying mild or very mild. There are some dry spells at times in the first few days once Storm Bram, which is affecting the United Kingdom at the start of the forecast period, moves away, and the driest conditions often in the south and the east. So by the weekend, that general theme is staying in place. Continuing through to conclusion, not a great deal changes, but there is a possibility of further wet and windy spells for a time. And I think the key takeaway here is that throughout the week, or more or less throughout it, winds are coming in from the west or the southwest, so it's unlikely to be cold, and that's putting things mildly. Here's the upper air temperature sequence. The UK inside the red circle. The projection is a little bit different on this to what I normally use. I'll probably try and update it to make it consistent with the other model projections for this type of animation. Well, it still shows things clearly though. The greens and yellows and oranges are indicating that upper air temperatures are close to or above the norm. It's the blues which indicate cold air running this, and throughout the week we get mild pulses moving up from the west to southwest, and the blues don't really make any inroads on the United Kingdom, so it's going to be staying mild throughout the week. At least this is the suggestion from the European model. But let's have a look at some of the day-to-day charts using the UKV data. Wednesday afternoon, temperatures on the left, 12 Celsius, 13 Celsius maybe in the south, cooler as you head northwards, but generally a mild picture. And precipitation sequence on the right there suggests will be some showers around. The heaviest ones are likely to be in the north, but it will be a respite at least after Storm Bram moves away, although still very windy actually in the north at this point. I'll look at that a little bit later. The picture on Thursday, double figure temperatures in southern and central regions, a few degrees lower once more in the north and northwest, and we've got outbreaks of rain pushing into western areas, maybe staying dry in central and eastern counties of England. There are some showery outbreaks of rain also being shown on this in the south, the southwest, but all in all, wetter in the western part of the United Kingdom as the sequences indicated at the start. Friday, temperatures have dipped now in the north and west. This could well be the chilliest day of the week, but even so, just around the average, maybe even still a little bit above it. The UKV, I think, tends to undershoot maximum temperatures a tad, so maybe add a degree or so onto these values. There's some rain around, it's moving eastwards, probably fragmenting as it does so, but there could well be some heavier bursts mixed in, particularly in the north and the west, and brighter conditions following behind it. Saturday, we're back to being very mild, and also we've got nasty outbreaks of rain, an area of low pressure, bringing very unsettled conditions through this period. It may well be very windy again too, and I'll also look at this in just a moment. Sunday and Monday, using data from the GFS model, because of course the UKV doesn't reach this far forwards. It's mild. I've probably used that word quite a lot already, and it's well placed in this forecast update, I think. Often dry at this, according to GFS, in the south and the east, a greater risk of rain or showers in the northwest and the west on Sunday and Monday. But of course, at this range, the details remain up for grabs. Overnight lows, is there going to be a lot of frost around? Well, I think that's very, very unlikely indeed. These are the values on Thursday morning and Friday morning. I've just used them for illustrative purposes. I think the Thursday morning chart shows about the lowest values I could find for England, so maybe down to 5 or 6 degrees. The Friday chart shows the possibility of some ground frost there in the Scottish Glens and in Northern Ireland. But it's winds which I think are going to be a bigger feature of the weather, as I've mentioned. This is showing wind gusts on Wednesday afternoon, so Storm Bram is moving away at this point, but as I've said, it's very windy still in the northern half of the United Kingdom. And then as we go into the weekend's uncertainty about how things are going to be developing, the chart on the left shows the forecast from the UKV model. On the right, it's the European. The UKV indicating that gusts of over 50 miles an hour are possible on Saturday afternoon, Saturday evening in much of England and Wales. The strongest winds, though, of course, around the coastal counties of the west, the southwest, and maybe eastern parts of England, the northwest too. Conversely, the European has lower wind speeds in inland areas, particularly in southern and central parts of the UK, with the gales mostly confined to the northwest. So keep an eye on the short range forecast, because there is the potential at this point for another spell of nasty weather, heavy outbreaks of rain and disruptive winds. But as you can see from here, the details need to be firmed up. And the MOGREPS-G just highlights some of the uncertainty about wind gusts through that period. The 12th to the 14th or 15th of December, this is showing forecast wind gusts for the London area. Each one of these lines represents a run from within the ensemble model, and you can see there's quite a big spread there. Certainly the potential, even in the southeast, for strong winds. Some of the individual runs going up to around 50 miles an hour. But as I say, there is quite a big spread showing up there, and windy conditions more likely, once more, in the west and the northwest. Stronger winds more likely, I should really say. Temperatures, as I've already noted, are going to often be above the average, and it's not just in the south. So I've brought up the MOGREPS-G temperature forecast for Inverness. Double figures there, or close to, through the first few days. They dip a little bit. There's that slightly cooler interlude, but nonetheless fairly mild. A few runs are going down to 0 degrees, the chance of overnight frost there for a time. But then later on, the trend once more is upwards. So it's not just for southern half UK, as I say, it's going to be all areas, although the mildest conditions will tend to be in southern and central regions, but even northern Scotland will see temperatures which are often well above the norm. Rainfall, the charts here show the 5-day accumulations based on data from the ECM and GFS models. Wettest in the west and the northwest. The ECM has higher totals generally. Drier as you head into central and eastern parts of the UK. And moving forwards to the 10-day charts, totals have continued increasing in the west and the northwest, particularly with the European model. GFS, though, is saying that there should be quite a lot of dry weather between days 5 and days 10 in central and eastern counties of England. But when we look at the ensemble plots a little bit later, what you'll see is that the GFS operational was a big outlier. So it was not consistent with many of the other runs within the model. So perhaps pay a little bit more heed to the chart on the left, which is based on the European. So lower rainfall totals generally in central and eastern counties of England, but still significant amounts if that is how things transpire. Therefore, in more general terms, how do the deterministic models compare with each other as we head towards the end of the first week? Here is the GFS on Tuesday, the 16th of December. High pressure centre to the east and to the southwest. A southerly or southwesterly flow moving up across the UK. So I think we can discount cold weather at this point if it's right. Similar with the Canadian model, high pressure there over continental Europe, areas of low pressure moving in from the Atlantic, maybe a bit more unsettled. Likewise with the German icon, there's a tight pressure gradient there, deep area of low pressure to the northwest, the high over continental Europe. The European, so the one which the sequences were based on this week, high pressure to the east, low pressure areas to the west, to the northwest, and a southwesterly flow of sorts moving up across the UK. The artificial intelligence version of the European, quite similar. And finally, the UK Met Office Global. This one is a bit different actually. It's got a nasty looking small area of low pressure approaching from the southwest, and that's threatening to bring rain and wind back to the southern part of Britain. So the general message here is as we go towards the end of the first week, it's a changeable pattern. Dry periods are more likely in southern and eastern counties of England, and temperatures will be staying above the long-term average. Will that continue as we head through the second week, or is a change on the way? Let's take a look. And of course, it's just about the trends and the probabilities at this range based upon the ensemble data. Here's the 16-day GEFS plot for London. Well, there is something being signalled here, and it's as we approach the Christmas period, which maybe will heighten interest. To begin with, upper air temperatures, so at about 1,500 metres above sea level, are generally significantly above the average. The thick purple line, the ensemble mean, is above the thick black line, the 30-year norm. But as we go forwards, that ensemble mean is dipping and it's actually falling a little bit below the long-term average towards the end of the second week, so just before the Christmas period really starts. And there are a number of runs in there which are quite cold. There is one there which is actually very cold. It's a big outlier. You can see it's dipping down below minus 10 degrees. I didn't take a look at the individual run, but it's probably got high pressure to the north and maybe an easterly flow moving across continental Europe into Britain. And I mentioned earlier that the GFS operational was a big outlier. You can see here why I knew that, because the thick green line is the GFS operational, and it is well above virtually all of the other runs throughout the second week. So it really was exceptionally mild, probably record-breakingly so. But most of the ensemble runs are painting a more average picture, especially later on. Also, lots of rain spikes along the bottom there, but their number is decreasing from around the 21st. There are still spikes showing up after them, but fewer, so the chance of dry periods increases. We can see earlier on there is a chance through week one, there is a significant amount of dry weather being signalled by the GEFS in the southeast, as I've already mentioned. But then it's more unsettled once more for a time into the second week. It's just later on as we get towards the 21st that the number of spikes starts to dip away again. 2 metre temperatures for London. Mild or very mild to start off with. Lots of light green, still a fair amount of yellow. The yellows are 11 to 15s. But through the second half of the second week, dark green starts to increase in these columns. Those are runs which are going for a cold setup between 1 and 5 degrees through the days. Those are the maximums. And the nighttime lows are also falling away as we go through the second half of the week. So signs of a change. Up to Manchester, a similar story here. 850 HPA temperature values are dipping to the average or a little bit below it. The number of rain spikes is decreasing. and the 2 metre temperatures for Manchester following similar trends to the London ones, just falling away later in the period. Finally, up to Glasgow, and here the signal for a negative 850 HPA temperature anomaly is greater than it was further south. There's a bigger, the ensemble mean is falling further below the long-term average, so the thick purple line's dipping significantly below the thick black line as we head through the second week. Also, the rain risk is decreasing. What about the snow row? Values of around 7. A low chance of snow falling, but not out of the question. The snow row can go up to 33, so 7 out of 33 runs are indicating that there could at least be a few flakes of snow falling down to ground level. It doesn't mean they're going to be accumulating. The 2 metre temperatures, the same trend manifested here, and the overnight lows would point towards a much greater risk of frost returning in the north towards the end of the second week. Rainfall, the percentage chance of 5 or more millimetres of rain falling on the first 3 days of the second week based on the European ensemble, and it's a high chance actually in the west and the northwest, between 60 to 80%. Lower, much lower actually as you move into eastern England, East Anglia there in particular, only between maybe 5 and 30%. Forwards to the next 3 days, the colours diluting, as is often the case as the ensemble spread starts to increase the further ahead that you look, but still the same pattern is being forecast. Drier in central and eastern parts of Britain, wetter therefore of course in the west, which is still bearing the brunt of anything which is coming in from the Atlantic. The GEFS mean surface level pressure data table for York also has some interest. Low pressure dominating through the first 3 or 4 days, that's indicated by the greens, blues and purples, but the amount of yellow starts to climb, as does the amount of orange. Those are runs which are strongly high pressure dominated. So by the last few days, we're seeing more than half of the runs, maybe 60 to 70% going into the yellow and orange categories. And I think it's always worth highlighting that you need to see this trend continuing through successive updates, because there was something a little bit similar to this, I think, last week, and it didn't really come to anything. It faded away. But definitely here, there does seem to be a signal for pressure to be rising as we head towards the Christmas period. So the mean surface level pressure data table there was taking us forward through time. This, on the other hand, is just a snapshot showing pressure around 850 HPA temperatures from the GEFS mean on Friday the 19th. A westerly or southwesterly flow still bathing the UK. Temperatures at this level probably not too far off the average by then, and that fits in with the graphs which I've been using. It is actually quite well defined, the flow. The isobars pack relatively closely together, and often when you're plotting a mean chart from the GEFS or the European ensemble, because there are quite a few different solutions, the isobars tend to be more spaced out, but here they are quite closely aligned, so indicating a vigorous Atlantic flow still according to most of the runs in the model. And it's the same sort of story with the European ensemble, maybe more of a southwesterly tilt here if anything, so a little bit milder, but still a changeable or unsettled theme at this point. So to summarise, week 1, it's changeable with wet and windy spells, but drier at times, particularly in the south and the east. It will often be very mild. Week 2, an unsettled and mild start, so further outbreaks of rain and strong winds are likely. But later on, the rain risk starts to decrease and temperatures dip. Just how much they dip is open to question. So, there we have it. Often mild or very mild, at least until later on in the second week, but there is that chance of further disruption due to heavy outbreaks of rain leading to flooding and strong winds. Keep an eye on how things develop on Saturday and Sunday, because there is still uncertainty about the details, as I discussed. There's also an indication from some of the computer model runs that we could have another very windy spell at the end of the first week or at the start of the second. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video and found it useful. Then, as ever, if you did, please consider hitting the like button below, and of course subscribing to the channel if you've not done so already. In that way you'll not be missing any of my future updates. And don't forget to stay up to date with the day-to-day developments by checking out the weatheroutlook.com website. Thanks so much now. Bye.